Welcome in, everybody, to the flagship podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns 24/7, joined as always by our fearless leader, managing editor of Horns 24/7, the one and only Taylor Estes. And Taylor, it is a big day for Texas Longhorns football.
It is.
Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers, the prodigal quarterback who was once committed to Texas, decommitted, signed with reclassified from the class of 2022 to 2021. And so he could get NIL money, mind you,
$1
and
million
signed with Ohio State.
reportedly too.
Right. Took 2 snaps for the Buckeyes, got back in the portal, and now he's headed to Texas. And this is huge news. It's all anyone at Horns 24/7 has been talking about. The Quinner mission is over. Quinn Ewers, he was the top quarterback in the 2022 class at one point, and just an immense talent, arm talent. Steve Sarkisian recruited him when he was at Alabama. He's got the mullet. He's got flair. And hopefully he's bringing guys with him, Taylor.
Yeah,
This is
for
big
sure.
news.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, I mean, we'll call it Quinn Miss came early this year for Texas fans because this is huge. I mean, Quinn Ewers, when he committed to Texas back in, I think it was August of 2020, as a 2022 recruit at that point, that was huge. That was huge. And then it was a big loss that Texas, kind of fell out of the race there when Tom Herman was the coach. And then he ended up reclassifying and signing at Ohio State. So that was a huge loss for Texas. But the fact that it's come full circle now, Chip, it's crazy. It just goes to show how wild the transfer portal and how wild recruiting can be, especially in today's modern day recruiting era. But this is a huge get for Texas. This is the highest rated quarterback commit. Or as a high school recruit, he was the highest rated quarterback commit ever since Vince Young. And they don't really give perfect ratings in the recruiting industry for very many recruits in the country, and he's one that did get a perfect rating according to 24/7 Sports Composite. So there's no denying that this is a game changer for Texas. And as you mentioned, now he's got to bring some game changers alongside with him.
Yeah, I mean, he's I think back to when Chris Sims um, signed with Texas and was able to bring Roy Williams and Sloan Thomas and BJ Johnson along with him. And Texas is in desperate need of receivers in this 2022 signing class, with Joshua Moore transferring out, the lack of depth that was so apparent at the end of the season, and even over the second half of the season when Jordan Whittington was out. That's the sign of a Pied Piper. And the quarterback is the one position usually that can bring skill talent along. And so, this is going to be really big to watch because receivers want to play with a supremely talented passing quarterback. And that's the pedigree of Quinn Ewers. So, when you look at the recruiting needs right now for Texas, it's clearly offensive line. Number one, we've reported that Texas is interested in bringing in 7 to 9, in the 2022 class, either high school recruits, some combination of high school recruits and portal transfers. That is easily the number one priority for Texas football in terms of adding talent to the roster. Steve Sarkisian talked about, we could, bring up to 33 new players in for the 2022 season, offensive line. And then it's, safety and receiver, and you can kind of pick which one. But Quinn Ewers, what we were hearing behind the scenes was that, he wanted to kind of get this out there, right as signing day was coming. So he might be able to try to bring some guys with him, whether they're offensive linemen or receivers. Taylor, I think that's big because Texas needs that. And honestly, I think some are surprised that it took as long as it did because, Quinn Ewers, when he committed to Texas, said he was a Longhorn fan growing up. It was his dream school, was the quote. And then he, just didn't, he didn't have enough faith in Tom Herman and the direction of the program. So he decommitted. He ends up, as we said, reclassifying, signing with Ohio State. But now he's back at what initially was, he called his dream school after being courted heavily by Texas Tech and TCU. I think A&M tried to get in there. So it's a huge win for Texas. They obviously need to beef up their quarterback position. We heard from Steve Sarkisian. He said he was going to go in the portal to do that. They also have Malik Murphy, the incoming freshman who who committed to Texas a long time ago, and so with Casey Thompson, Hudson Card, you still have Charles Wright on the roster, even though he wasn't even the third string quarterback over the second half of the season. It was walk on Ben Ballard, which ought to tell Charles Wright something, probably. But this is, Steve Sarkisian wants to beef up that quarterback room, add competition, and see if they can get more consistency from that position.
Yeah, and because I think the one thing that everybody saw this season, you saw a lot of flashes from the quarterbacks that Texas does have on the roster. I feel like Casey Thompson, prior to his thumb injury that went down against Oklahoma, he was playing pretty well, especially for being at that point a really green starter. He had only the OU game, I believe, was what his fourth game ever starting at the college level. So but he really played well. I think that thumb injury impacted him in his production, no doubt about it, Chip. But it also didn't help that he didn't have Jordan Whittington, and he didn't really have the. I mean, he had Xavier Worthy, and Xavier Worthy obviously had a monster season. There's no denying that. But Xavier Worthy, without Jordan Whittington on the field, was the only receiving, threat that Texas had, and that's a tough situation for any quarterback, I think, to be in. But this is going to be really interesting to see how this competition kind of plays out throughout the offseason. I think there's a lot of questions with Quinn Ewers coming to Texas now. How many quarterbacks are going to be on the roster come spring practice or after spring practice? That's going to obviously be something to watch. But Steve Sarkisian has been very open about what his state of the quarterback room really is. And, as we've talked time and again on the flagship podcast, the reason why Steve Sarkisian has the job at Texas is because of how well he's been able to develop that position and, put together really elite offenses at pretty much every stop that he's been at. So, the fact that Steve Sarkisian's been really open with Casey Thompson, with Hudson Card, and publicly about the need for more quarterback depth is saying a lot. And, I think that this is going to be a really interesting, battle, I would say, to watch, Chip, because if assuming, Hudson Card, Casey Thompson, and Quinn Ewers are all on the roster, that quarterback battle can be really, really intriguing, I think, especially, I don't necessarily think that at this point it's automatically somebody's job. I mean, Steve Sarkisian has said that may be coach speak, maybe him trying to keep the other guys on the roster or anything like that. But adding this level of talent is only going to bolster that room. And that's something that Texas really hasn't had in a long time, especially at the quarterback position.
Yeah, and it's look, Steve Sarkisian's offense is not easy. It is voluminous. We've heard all the players say how much there is in his offense, all for the quarterback, especially with all the motions and the shifts and the option routes that the quarterback and the receiver have to be on the same page with. And Casey Thompson, who started, obviously the majority of the games, set a UT record, only quarterback in school history to have 3 games where he threw for 5 touchdowns against Texas Tech, against OU, against Kansas. Has experience in that system. Quinn Ewers has not played football. I mean, he practiced with Ohio State. He took 2 snaps in a game, but he hasn't led a team for 2 football seasons. And so, there's going to be a incredible appetite from Longhorn Nation for Quinn Ewers to be on the field. In fact, for Casey Thompson and Hudson Card, but mostly for Casey Thompson because Casey had a good performance in the Alamo Bowl at the end of 2020, but he wasn't the starter for 2021. It was Hudson Card, and you know this is the guy who's was never supposed to be the guy.
Mhm.
Reminds me a little bit of Major Applewhite in that way. Um, it was all Chris Sims came. Hey man, we need Sims. We don't need Applewhite. And I think Casey Thompson will battle. I think he'll use that year of experience and battle for the job. And remember, Steve Sarkisian doesn't like to play first year quarterbacks. Now, and I mentioned Bryce Young, who's probably as talented a quarterback as we've seen in the college ranks. And then, he sat and watched Mac Jones last year at Alabama before, getting the system digested and having this incredible season that he's uh, had for Alabama. My question to you, Taylor, is will Longhorn Nation accept anything other than Quinn Ewers? I mean, for Casey Thompson, who has to walk around campus and go out there on Saturday. And I remember Major Applewhite. It it was like it almost doesn't matter what I do, everybody wants Chris Sims.
Right.
You got to have some thick skin. You got to have some blinders on. You got to have some earplugs in. If you're Casey Thompson trying to compete for the job, and it's not, he led the Big 12 in passing touchdowns this past year. So it's not like he's a slouch. And I think
Right.
Texas fans are, because of the up and down nature. And look, there were some games where the defense totally caved in, Kansas, Oklahoma, that were not Casey's fault. Those losses aren't on him. But still, I mean, we've had to have some Quinterventions on our site because of the appetite of Longhorn Nation for Quinn Ewers.
Yeah, and that's the biggest key right now, Chip, is if Texas fans are going to allow this to really play out. Because think about it this way: Quinn Ewers technically should be coming out of high school right now. He should not be coming as a transfer from Ohio State because he did reclassify. He hasn't. You're right. He hasn't played football aside from 2 snaps in the 2021 season, and then he was injured for a number of games in 2020 when he was a junior at South Lake Carroll there. But yeah, I mean, this is something that you've got to have patience, and I know that is for a lot of Texas fans, and I understand it's been a long decade of mediocrity or worse, but patience is probably not a word that's in many Texas fans' vocabulary, or they try to not have it in their vocabulary, and I understand that take. But this is a difference maker type of quarterback, and to expect him to be ready day one probably is not a feasible or reasonable expectation. I actually think that it's going to be really good for all of the quarterbacks to have a competition, and for Quinn Ewers maybe to come in a little bit, the quote unquote underdog. I know that probably sounds crazy considering he's the highest rated quarterback prospect since Vince Young, but I think that it's a good thing that he has Casey Thompson and he has Hudson Card to kind of learn from and battle with, because they have gone through it. Quinn has not gone through a true quarterback battle at the college level. I mean, he enrolled in Ohio State, I think at like in August, I think it
Right.
was last year. So
Very
he
late.
didn't. Yeah, I mean, he essentially is coming in, Chip, as a how a true freshman would, because he didn't have an off season like at a collegiate, strength and conditioning program. He didn't go through summer workouts. He did go through a little bit of fall camp, but it was such a last minute addition to the, joining the college ranks, that it's really like a true freshman coming in. So Texas fans, I feel like, are not going to want to be patient if he has a little bit of growing pains, but this is not a guy that you throw in the towel in or think, oh, he's a bust. Because as I said earlier, I can promise you, like with the recruiting rankings, with the 24/7 recruiting team that we have, they are very, very hesitant to give the rating that they gave Quinn Ewers to anybody, because it essentially is saying that this is a top 10 draft pick potential. And that's what Quinn Ewers really has. Mike Roach and Nick Harris were talking about him on the State of Recruiting podcast last Friday. And they mentioned about how, Quinn Ewers not only has first round draft potential, he has number one overall draft potential. So maybe give this guy some time to learn the college system, go through the strength and conditioning off season, winter conditioning, summer months, and let this play out. But this is Texas is in a much, much better situation now than I think that they expected to be in at the quarterback position for a while, honestly, Chip. And there's definitely a lot of exciting times. And if this edition says anything about what Steve Sarkisian and his coaching staff are able to sell, I mean, they sold this guy to come to Texas after a losing season. Texas, he's not going to watch Texas play in a bowl game because they're not going to a bowl game. So the fact that you're able to get this generational type of playmaker to the campus where he had his choice of wherever he wanted to go, essentially, that is something that you should definitely not overlook. And this is a really good sign for Sarkisian and the coaching staff's ability to sell the future of Texas football.
Yeah, and he's an interesting character because, depending on who you listen to, Ohio State wasn't incredibly, they were like, eh, about him reclassifying and coming in early. Um, and, obviously the family did that because he was able to collect NIL money. And obviously, there's been all kinds of speculation about, NIL money coming to Texas, and could this kid already be over $1 million in NIL money without having, played any meaningful college football snaps and walking into a locker room full of, players who are looking at this guy going, okay, what are you all about? I mean, he's got to adapt. He's got to win over this locker room. Otherwise, we talk about it all the time. Steve Sarkisian talks about it. Guys have to play for their quarterback. They've
Right.
got to rally around the quarterback. And that might be a maturing process that takes time as well. And the other thing I think is interesting, I've been talking to some people about, okay, well, what does this mean for Arch Manning and his recruitment? And the fact that Quinn Ewers did reclassify means that he's a second year guy in 2022 and would be starting his third season in 2023 when Arch Manning potentially could be arriving as a freshman. So that actually, sets up to where there's, you know, you can sell that to Arch Manning saying, well, he's only got, 2 years left. We don't want to rush you in. And Steve Sarkisian, I know from talking to his former, coaches he's worked with, doesn't like playing first year quarterbacks as the starter because it's just too much. But we'll see. We'll see how special Quinn Ewers is. And we'll see how Steve Sarkisian handles this and how Casey Thompson, handles it, because we've talked that Steve Sarkisian and the Texas staff have been looking in the portal for a veteran quarterback as well. Now, I think Steve Sarkisian's telling his, current quarterbacks that he would like to have a veteran in case something happens, to the starter or to also compete, because he doesn't want to have to rush Quinn Ewers. But it's also insurance, Taylor, obviously, if one or more of the current quarterbacks on the roster decide, you know what, I'm out. So
Mhm.
it's a very interesting balance that Steve Sarkisian is walking here. because he obviously does not want to lose Casey Thompson or Hudson Card. Um, Again, if I'm Charles Wright, I don't know what I'm doing. I
Yeah.
mean, if I'm not even ahead of the walk on, maybe I need to, make a call. But it's fascinating because Steve Sarkisian himself said that the days of having 4 and 5 quarterbacks in your quarterback room are probably gone because of the age of the transfer portal. So it's fascinating, but the bottom line is Texas adding a huge talent at the quarterback position. Now we got to see what kind of a leader he is, what kind of a teammate he is, how quickly can he process Steve Sarkisian's offense, and then how snaps get divided. So it's fascinating because spring football is going to have all kinds of anticipation.
Yeah, for sure, Chip. And the one thing that Quinn Ewers does have at least some experience of is being in a college film room, being in a college offensive playbook. I mean, Ohio State's offense is not some scrub offense. You know what I mean? I mean, that's a very elite program, and they have a really solid offense. Obviously, their quarterback CJ Stroud has played fantastic this season, but that's one thing that it is a little bit better for Texas. He may not have the off-season work that a standard type of transfer player would have at this point, but he does know the ins and outs of what it takes, with film study, with being in the playbook, learning the playbook on the fly quickly, obviously, since he enrolled in Ohio State back in August, before that season. I mean, the fact that he even saw the field in any game at least is a good sign, I feel like, for at least his understanding of the Ohio State playbook. Obviously, it wasn't any type of substantial, game reps or anything. He had 2 handoffs, but still, I mean, the fact that they were willing to put him on the field to me shows that he at least understood and grasped a hold of the Ohio State offense. And that's, obviously the offense that Texas runs is totally different. It's a different playbook. But I do think that the reason why a lot of coaches, they don't want, and Steve Sarkisian being one, don't want to start a first year, player a lot of times is because there's so much that's thrown at these quarterbacks and their playbook is so substantial that it takes time. The learning curve has to be there a little bit and they have to go through it. I mean, quarterback and offensive line are the 2 positions that ideally I think pretty much every coach in college football would want to redshirt if they have the opportunity to, unless they have some sort of, just special type of guy. I mean, there's 2 freshmen who have ever won the Heisman. They were both redshirt freshmen. There's never been a true freshman Heisman winner. There's been very few true freshmen who have won some of the top college football awards. So that's, I think, one thing where Texas does have a little, or Quinn Ewers has a little bit of an edge as opposed to bringing in, like say a Malik Murphy, for instance, is coming in from high school, hasn't learned the college game, doesn't realize, all of the ins and outs that go into not just, film study and getting playbook and in the weight room and the reps and all of that, but also managing a school workload as well, too. I mean, there's a lot of differences between the high school and college game, especially for quarterbacks. So that's one thing I do think that it'll be interesting to see how quickly he does grasp it, because it does, at least from, all signs point to he was grasping at least the Ohio State playbook. It was just, I think he saw the writing on the wall that CJ Stroud's going to be a hard person to kind of overtake, because he had such a great year this year. But it's going to be fascinating, and this is why you definitely want to be an annual member of Horns 24/7. We are currently running a 50% off annual special. This is valid for new members, and then current monthly members who upgrade to annual, they will also get this discount. Ends up being about $448 per month for the first 12 months of your membership. There's going to be plenty more to come with this, Chip. Not just in the quarterback battle throughout the offseason, but also what's going on with transfer portal, some transfer portal additions that the coaching staff is planning to continue to look for, even outside of the early signing period and National Signing Day. So no shortage of information at Horns 24/7 right now. So get on board for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and don't forget that whoever's at quarterback for Texas next year is going to face Louisiana Monroe in week 1, and then the Alabama Crimson Tide in week 2, and Jeff Traylor and the UTSA Roadrunners, who had an amazing 12-1 season, won their conference championship in week 3. all of
Somehow
those.
aren't in the top 25 college football playoff
Yeah,
rankings. Okay.
yeah. So it's a lot, and whoever's playing quarterback also is going to want that offensive line fortified as much as possible, and so we will keep you up to date on everything going on with the Longhorns. As Taylor said, it's going to be a bonkers, um, time even between now and spring football with both signing dates and all the activity in the portal. So um, for Taylor Estes, I am Chip Brown. Thanks everybody for listening. Quinn Ewers to Texas,
Quinn Miss.
Quinn Miss, and
Mary Quinn Miss here.
Merry Quinn Miss, Texas fans. Until next time, stay safe and keep the faith.